Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's it going? You're very welcome today to Aghada. This is a memorial for Frampton, Jeffery. I'd like to say hello as well to all the people who will be watching us online, either right now or later on YouTube. Aghada Presbyterian Church has a YouTube page. You can watch it afterwards if you wish. Folks, you know full well, don't you? One of the realities the last 3 years is that many people died and we weren't able to commemorate them properly. Many folks went into the ground without a good time of thanks and mourning for all who knew the person, as we're used to doing in our own particular way here in Ireland. So this afternoon, the family want to rectify that as much as they can. This is not a funeral, that was done. This is a memorial time to remember and reflect on the life of a man who lived amongst us and affected us for the good. If you have your program in front of you, you'll see that many of Frampton's family and friends have something to contribute. And mostly we'd ask you to listen, but we do have one hymn at the end for you to join in with. I'm going to hand you over, and I will, by the way, I'm going to hand you over to Frampton's kids, and throughout the program, if you're playing a part, I will call you up by name, and you can join in. But right now, I want to hand you over to Barbara, Gavin, Amy, and Andrea.
How long does a man live? A man lives for as long as we carry him inside us, for as long as we carry the harvest of his dreams, for as long as we ourselves live, holding memories in common, a man lives.
We are all so happy to see you all here for this celebration of the wonderful life of our loving and kind Fram. We're here because he touched and enriched all of our lives with his enthusiasm and his bright energy, and we want to acknowledge and to celebrate him. Along with all the other Jeffery families, Aghada was a big part of his childhood, and we are so pleased to be sharing this very special day with you here. Fram had never-ending positivity. He put energy into his life, and he had fun. And he had fun with everybody here. We loved and admired his family and his professional ethics. He had the strongest, most kind and loyal friends. And Robert and Liam and Ken are going to speak to you about that. Fram has honoured us with a legacy of respect, fairness and honesty. We felt safe when he was around. We realised what an extraordinary person we had, and we miss him hugely. We know he's with us in spirit. We are very proud to have been his family.
A successful man. That man is a success, who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, who leaves the world better than he found it, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best he had.
Thank you. I want to call Fram's brother and sister, Robert and Audrey, to come now, give their own reflections on Fram's life.
I think, let me start by saying, I think I've never seen a church so full. I see many faces and many close friends of Frampton here, and that's almost overwhelming. On the 5th of June, I think it was a Monday, 1951, Frampton and I were born along with our first cousin, Brian Snow, in Canada, thereby providing 3 grandsons on the day to Elizabeth Jeffery, our grandmother. 5 years later, Fram and I were enrolled at Summerhill National School next to Trinity Church. As young students, we appeared to excel consistently in coming first and second in the class. But I suppose what I should probably mention is that there was only 2 of us in the class. At the age of 7, together we joined the Life Boys. I had at the time a mortifying inability in tying shoelaces. However, when the need arose to put on gym shoes, Fram and I would disappear behind the changing room lockers, and he would assist me in lacing up. This occurred every week over a 4-year period, and I knew my secret was safe with Frampton, a very caring brother. Now, this is not in the script, but many years later, well, not too many years later, but when we were teenagers and we were going out on occasion, maybe to a wedding or something, Frampton would come to me and say, can you tie a good Windsor for me? And I obliged. And I think he was reciprocating because I knew very well he could tie a very good Windsor himself. Talking to a good friend of mine during the week in regard to putting a few words together, he inquired of me as to how I would best describe Frampton in a single word. My initial response was that it would be difficult as a superlative amount of words would be required. The word special came to mind. Then my friend asked me to expand to 2 words. And my immediate response was, oh, very special. As a twin brother, he was indeed very special to me and very special to both Donnie and Audrey, the extended family, and his many, many close friends. At the age of 11, we both went to board at Middleton College. Fram shone on the rugby pitch as he was an excellent front row hooker, winning the majority of scrums when the ball was thrown in. And even though the college may not have won, he won the majority of scrums, despite being a very light 8-stone front row player. What became very clear during our college years at Middleton, as mentioned previously by John of Rathcorsey, Frampton was an uncompromising supporter for the underdog, and this shone through on many occasions at Middleton College, a feature of his character which I much admired. Fram could also be highly stubborn, but only where a question of principle was at stake. He literally would not climb down from his high horse until he was fully assured and satisfied that a principle was not at stake. I much admired this sheer determination in this regard. Highly important for Fram was his close friends, and they were many close friends, and I would use the word very close. They were friendships he consistently cared for and looked after. Some of his friendships went back over 60 years, and most, if not all, I can see are in attendance today. It is significant to mention that Frampton was very much central to our family. This is very much evident when Frampton and Barbara set up home in Carrigaline, in the mid-70s, to be followed by my mother in the mid-80s, as she moved to the estate next door to Frampton and Barbara. To be followed by Mary and I, and in the late 80s, and Audrey and family in the 90s. Does not this speak volumes? In the mid-90s, Frampton and Barbara acquired a homestead at Skull and transformed it into a beautiful home with an open door policy to all visitors and friends. Both Mary and I have many treasured memories of being invited to numerous dinner parties with up to 12 close friends seated around their very generous dining table. These occasions were most convivial, full of banter and debate of current affairs, with the odd rendition outburst from Fram. I can only say Fram and Barb as a team were excellent hosts, and the food was second to none. These were very much treasured moments and memories that I would wish to hold on to as long as I can. Frampton enjoyed on many occasions sitting together, that was Frampton and I, enjoyed on many occasions sitting together watching Formula One Grand Prix. Fram was an out-and-out Ferrari fan, and I must say it is good to see Rory, his eldest grandson, follow on as a most enthusiastic and knowledgeable Ferrari fan, who has apparently influenced many of his schoolmates in watching the seasonal racing. Yes, Fram was special, very special to me and all who knew him, including his extended family. The abundance of good and great memories do allow us to conclude that Fram has only moved to the room next door, so to speak. I thank you all for listening and allowing me to share. Sorry.
Thank you, Robert. Audrey? No. And I'm going to call Donald Jeffery now to come and read from God's Word to us.
First of all, Rob, thank you very much for that. I certainly couldn't have stood up here and done that. Luckily, I just have a reading, which I think I can get through. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time for peace. I couldn't give a eulogy, but just a few little words, if I may. My brothers, who I always called the twins, were kind of my heroes when I was young. And I just want to say, to this day, they're still very much my heroes. along with Nicky Lauda, of course. Thank you.
Folks, we're going to listen to a piece of music by Frampton's son-in-law, Ben Dillon now. This is Couldn't Love You More by English author John Martin.
If you kiss the sun right out of the sky, if you told me all the lies that I deserve, if you lay your night in the rain for me, I couldn't love you. Just couldn't love you. I couldn't love if you love me till my eyes can no more shine for you. If you walk beside me all the long way home. If you wasted all your time on me, I couldn't love you more. I just couldn't love you more. I couldn't love you more. I just couldn't love you more. If you gave me all the things I've never asked of you, if you showed me all the ways that I cried, if you lay your night in the rain for me, I couldn't love you more. I just couldn't love you more. I couldn't love
Thank you, Ben. I just have a few words for you as the minister of this church today. Frampton grew up coming to Aghada Presbyterian. We've been here in East Cork since the 1860s, and this building actually since 1925. Consistently since then, our ministers and members have sought to point family and friends around them by their lives and words to the faith handed down throughout the centuries, and also to their own personal understanding of Christianity. We witness to the faith and to our own faith. We can't do any more. Now today, as you well know, Christian beliefs are often rejected or dismissed. And we live in a time when tolerance above all else is expected. And so the exclusivity of Jesus' message, some of the ideas that we believe in, such as hell, salvation, our simple nature, and more than a few of our positions on moral behaviors, put us at odds with the surrounding population. We also live in an island where, for the most part, the background ideas that people operate when it comes to God, whether they go to church or not. Makes them say that folks are not so bad in the eyes of God, and that salvation is a cooperative task done with God. Both of these are actually in stark contrast to the Protestant understanding of the Bible, where it teaches that we see ourselves naturally far worse, but the forgiveness of God is of far greater impact. Our gospel has a worse opening, but a better punchline. Grace is not a pill to help, but a miracle, always and everywhere. And God's not your granddad in the sky who gives you a dig out every now and again. He's the omnipotent, all-knowing creator who offers his forgiveness and love. Why am I saying all this today of all days? I'll tell you why. I don't know Frampton's understanding of Jesus or his relationship with the church or how he had taught of those things in the last years of his life. But regardless, I want you all to know, or at least hear from me today, that Christianity is not all bad news and hard angles that are difficult to swallow. The same God that I've just described invented love. God is love. And all people are made in his image. It's what makes us special. We're not animals. We're people. We're different. John Martin, the singer-songwriter who wrote the beautiful song we've just heard, I Couldn't Love You More, he also had a very destructive life which eventually took him in the end. And yet look at the beauty that he made. He too was made in the image of God. He had a gift from God that God gave him and flowed through him. And my point is this. Today is a very clear statement. The crowd that's here, the words that have been said, the emotion showed, the constant theme of the kind of man that Fram was. He had a lot of gifts. There will never be another Frampton. And God, who loves to make, made him. Gave him his gifts, gave him his time and place of birth. He was born where he was supposed to be born, so he could be the man that he was supposed to be. And you can dispute with me about who God is, but I'll go to my grave saying that the Lord made Frampton and gave him all his uniqueness. And you too. And it's his uniqueness that makes a memorial like this, all memorials, all the harder. C.S. Lewis was an author. He was also a Christian. He wrote the Narnia books. You probably heard of them. And he said that when someone dies, we don't lose them. We lose a part of ourselves. For their particular way of living drew something out of us that no one else could. And so when they go, that goes. It's very clear that Frampton drew a lot out of a lot of people. Thank God for it. I'll end with this. During the summer, I'm just back from holidays. If I'm a bit more spacey than usual, I'm still jet lagged. I apologize. But during the summer, I was reading a book. It's actually famous, called Fahrenheit 451, and it's about a dystopian future where books are banned and burned, and it's the last place that I expected to find a quote suitable for a memorial. But there you go. It goes like this. When I was a young boy, my grandfather died, and he was a sculptor. He was a very kind man who had a lot of love to give the world, and he helped clean up the slums in our town, and he made toys for us, and he did a million things in his lifetime. He was always busy with his hands. And when he died, I suddenly realized I wasn't crying for him at all, but for the things that he did. I cried because he would never do them again. He would never carve another piece of wood or help us raise doves or pigeons in the backyard or play the violin the way he did or tell us jokes the way he did. He was a part of us. And when he died, all the actions stopped dead and there was no one to do them just the way he did. He was an individual. He was an important man. I've never gotten over his death. And often I think what wonderful carvings never came to birth because he's gone. How many jokes are missing from the world and how many homing pigeons untouched by his hands. He shaped the world. He did things to the world. And the world was bankrupted of 10 million fine actions the night that he passed on. That quote is a bit maudlin and it's certainly without hope, but it gets to my point. We are made who we are, at least in part, by the people who loved us and the effect they had on us. You know, it's funny that you mentioned the wins or not. Every time, it happened to me today, every time I tie my tie, I think of my own father, because he taught me how to do it. I remember feeling so grown up when I got it done, and I thank him every time. May all the ways that Frampton touched your lives be a source of happiness to you. And if you have faith in God, thank him, because he made him. I'll pray for all these things at the end of the service. I'm going to call Dave Bovenizer to come now. He'll come up here and correct me.
I would like you all to picture the vision in your mind of Franz Alfa Romeo, the picture that's on your thing, so with his head not only underneath the bonnet, but with the roof off and the windows down. The poem is called A Classic Passion. Everything dipped in chrome, the paint, the colour of speed, with the interior made of the finest leather, and the trim the finest wood. The gear stick, that lever that lets me complete the speedometer and push the needle on the rev counter to the red line. The stereo blasting, never loud enough, Pink Floyd. 3 pedals on the floor, the middle one not needed, which is true to Fram. Windows down, roof down, so I can hear the mighty beast roar. That 8-cylinder piece of cast iron which propels my wheels forward and makes them kick up dust and smoke on the long stretch to meet my maker. With the sun on my back and the power under my heels, on this lonely road, the place where me and my beast belong. I realize I have now run my tank dry. I am running on fumes, as I always do. Because this passion of mine is always hungry, even when it is full, the passion which only a few understand.
Yes, sorry, I jumped ahead there actually. Liam Leahy is going to come up next and talk about Fram at work.
When I was asked to pay tribute to Frampton, a man I knew and worked with for most of my life, I felt that I could not put words together that would adequately describe the man I knew as a boss, a colleague, and a friend. If I was a poet, I could write an epic that would go some way to describe the man Frampton was. If I was an artist, I would paint a portrait of him that every gallery in the world would want to hang on their walls. If I was a writer, I would write his biography, The Life of Frampton, and I knew it would be a bestseller. But I'm not a poet, I'm not a writer, and I'm not an artist. So as going back in history now, I'll have to start with the Lee Garage in Middleton. Lee Garage purchased a premises in Middleton from Tom Maloney's Self Drive in 1970. I was on the staff at him of the Tom Maloney's, and we took over. So Albert Jeffery came down and was our main man in Middleton, taking over the Fiat franchise there. At that stage, the staff didn't know very little about Fiat. We were a Morris dealer at the time, and it was all new to us. They were a bit complicated in my life anyway at that stage, but that went on after anyway. So it was then we first came across Frampton, I suppose, really. That was back in the 70s, which takes us back 45 years at that stage until 2015. I worked closely with Albert, but again, not knowing an awful lot about Fiat, we often had to get on the phone to Frampton. And if we ever contact him in the Cork Garage, Frampton was always available to deal with any mechanical issues we had, and he would explain them thoroughly to us, and away we went. In the early 90s, Lee Gaddis changed the dealership in Middleton to become a Mazda dealer on Albert's retirement. I then became manager in Middleton and worked much more closely with Frampton. He was now a director of the Lee Gaddis Group, Lee Gaddis South Terrace, Lee Central Model Farm Road, and Middleton. We were in contact on a daily basis, and I must say that in that time we worked in harmony, always teasing out problems and forming ideas to make the dealership more successful. In 1994, Lee Gaddis sold the Middleton Group branch, and I was asked to join South Terrace dealership. From then on, we worked as a team under the leadership of Frampton to develop the dealership into one of the top Fiat, Alfa and commercial dealers in Ireland. And we also took on at that stage a mobility program, which I looked after, which Frampton always gave me my head, and away we went. And all through that time, we had many trips with Fiat to the factories in Italy, which are very enjoyable, I must say. And again, there was no problem taking time off. Frampton was one of those people that seemed to leave a lasting impression on those he met, be they customers or people who just called in to the showroom to have a look at the current stock and the prices. People kept coming back, and that was how the business progressed. He had an easygoing manner, and it's obvious that people trusted him. And I think, more than anything else, showed that he was an honest, decent, upright person. And that's why I stand here today to pay tribute to a man I know as Frampton Jeffery. I will always remember Frampton saying to me, if I ever asked him for some time off, or if I want to go across town for a message, no problem, Liam, he says, I'll see you when I'll see you. And away I went. The garage became involved with the Tour de France when it came to Cork. At that time, as Fiat were the main sponsors of the Tour de France, and I was on the board of Irish Cycling at the time. So therefore, we enjoyed many great celebration nights around this event, and Frampton was never found wanting with finance to fund such of these events. He was active both in the workplace and outside of it, and he took part in many activities to help others out. We organised many sponsored cycles to Limerick and Galway with the help of all the staff of Lee Garage, the Milton Cycling Club, Concept Advertising, and of course our volunteers, collectors, all our own friends and family as well, who came out in their numbers to support these events. Thanks to Frampton, collectors were always ready and willing. These cycling events raised over 50,000 in those years for the Children's Hospital in Dublin and Irish Cancer Society. When I was asked to pay a tribute to Frampton, a man I knew and worked with from, glasses. Frampton organised all the transport for these events and supplied the fuel as well. He was a man with a generous heart. To make sure he was part of these events, he took up cycling, and he would cycle from Cork to Schull at the weekends. He was totally committed to the task of taking part on our cycles, and I just heard recently he punctured on the way as well, which I didn't know much about at the time, but anyway, he got there and we had great times. In reminiscing with my colleagues, we all had great memories of working with Frampton. Many of them worked with him for over 40 years, not 20 years, 30 years and 40 years. And Frampton was, as always, and really highlights the man Frampton was. It was always said, we worked with Frampton rather than for him. Lee Garage had a reputation for long-standing staff, and this can be attributed to Frampton's support and kindness to his staff. Time is catching up now, and it was about 2 weeks before Frampton's passing. He and Barbara called in to see me at Dan Seaman Motors to chat all about the new cars, especially the Fiat and Alfa range. And then we all had a great chat about the time spent in the showrooms in the South Terrace. He was still very interested in the current models of Fiat and Alfa, and one could feel that they had a special place in his heart. We are here to celebrate the life of a great man, but let us remember that a great man needs support from his family. And we can say that Barbara, his wife, was the ideal supporter, as was his son Gavin, his daughters Amy and Andrea, as well as his extended family and fellow directors. Frampton has passed through a new beginning. Of that I have no doubt. He was a man of faith of humanity. He was humble, never seeking praise for the works of charity that he organised and promoted. Frampton was a Christian in every sense of the word, and I am certain that he has now found a home in heaven. Sleep easy, my friend, and may God protect us all until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you, Liam. I'm going to call the children up now. Rory, Clara, Byron, Sally, Dylan, Julian, Evie, and Faye. I'm going to pray for us.
We give thanks to those who make life more fun. We give thanks for all those caring for others. We celebrate the world of engineering, science, research, and medicine. Papa loves fixing things for others. Let us give thanks for all of those who have used their talents for the good of others. We celebrate all the musicians in the world. We give thanks for our family. We remember all the laughs with Papa and are grateful that he was a part of our lives.
Our last speaker this morning is Ken Brooks, who's going to talk to us about Fram as a friend.
If I can do now half as good as those grandchildren have done, I'd be a very happy man, I can tell you. Very happy man. I first met Fram at Middleton College, where we all were boarders, and it was September 1963, almost 59 years ago, which is another worrying thing. And of course, at the same time, I also met his twin brother, Rob, and their cousin, John Jeffery, and I think another cousin, Arthur Good, known as Artie. And then there was, I think, I know he's a cousin or he's a very good friend, John Ludgate, which for some reason, if I called him Joe, you'd like to forgive me because he was officially called John, but everybody else called him Joe. Right from the word go, we all got on very well. And the lads in Middleton were known as the Jeffery clan, not surprisingly, as I know I'm in Jeffery headquarters here at the moment. Times were very different in Ireland in the early 60s. And as we were all about 11 years of age when we were starting off, boarding in a school like Middleton College was no exception, and it was tricky enough at times, but this was the times of the era that we were living in. And there was only about 20 pupils in our year, and nearly all of them were boarders. And right from the very beginning, despite these harsh times, lifelong friendships were being formed. You could see from the very start that the Jeffery clan were very interested in anything mechanical and were to be seen during breaks examining the mechanics of the school's three-wheeled tractor belonging to a certain John Deedy, the caretaker. This will mean absolutely nothing to most of you, but to those who were there at the time, it was a very much important part of the routine. This then advanced on to the teachers' cars, especially those of our science teacher, D.B. Kiley, who had a Fiat 500, and here's the magic word, Fiat. and whose engine was subject to some very close examinations and indeed modifications by a certain Frampton Jeffery, especially just before the summer holidays. I won't go any further than that. Fram, Rob, Joe and Artie were always very kind to me and used to look after me. And the funny thing, as mentioned earlier, Fram was one of those guys, like he'd always look out for the underdog, he'd always mindful and take care of people and that. And I could speak for the next hour, I think, or two about all the adventures and the mischief that everybody got up to during those 6 years in Middleton College. But I have too much respect for you all to even consider going there. Suffice to say, they were legendary times. Unlike me, Fram and Rob were good at sports, and indeed, I think Fram is acknowledged as a very good rugby hooker. Isn't that correct? That's the correct terminology. You have to be careful on that. And used to play a fair bit of rugby. However, as we got to 5th and 6th year, our interests began to widen, and we began to discover, in no particular order, the world of motorbikes, music, a certain amount of alcohol, and girls, with the highlight of the year being the annual school dances in Rochelle Girls' School and the return match in Middleton College. By the time we left Middleton College in 1969, though, and this is the important thing, lifelong friendships had already been formed. After we left school, Fram, Rob and I remained very good friends. We had great fun with our motorbikes and the crack was mighty. I remember one particular night that I held a party in the church hall in Youghal. It was just after Christmas, and it turned out to be one of the coldest nights of the year. It was absolutely freezing. And Artie decided to travel to the party on his motorbike. However, there was so much ice on the roads that it took him about 3 hours to come from Cork to the party. When he arrived into the hall, he was absolutely frozen. He had 2 big red eyes, despite the fact that he had leather gauntlets almost up to his elbows and a massive coat on. And the interesting thing, and this is where sort of the whole family and connections, very mechanical, his pockets were bulging, but not what you might think with bottles of something or other. They were bulging with spark plugs, which were for repairing the bike when it would break down. I often stayed at Fram and Rob's house in Wayside in Glanmire, and Mr. and Mrs. Jeffery were absolutely lovely people, and I thoroughly enjoyed my times there. And Donald made reference earlier on to, being the home and stuff, and looking up at the big brothers and that. I remember the big brothers looking down at him one day when his father had an antique ransom lawnmower, and unfortunately it got written off by Donny driving a Fiat 500, I think, or 600, not too sure which. And the excuse was that he was actually learning how to drive with his feet crossed. And he accidentally hit the accelerator instead of the brake. Fram, in the meantime, had moved to Dublin to work at Fiat and learn his trade. And he told how our friend Dave Bogan had started rallying his own car. And again, apologies, please, to those who are non-car lovers. This is really tough. With a few minor modifications. And Fram and a few friends went to watch him in action on a night rally. When Dave saw them, he gave them a big wave and forgot to take the next corner and promptly crashed into a field. Another weekend, I went up to stay with Fram in his flat, despite having a head cold. Fram said the best remedy for the cold was a hot whiskey, and he gave me 1 or 2 at the bar. I was halfway through it when I nearly died. And from that day to this, I have never touched another drop of whiskey. So thanks, Frampton. John Ludgate, or so you say, Joe, was studying at Trinity College, and he invited Frampton and myself to stay there one night after a party. Unfortunately, we didn't realize that there were security guards at the main gate, and it took Fram and me about an hour and a half before we could sidle in with some students and get through. Unfortunately, to be called back and said, "Where now, guys? Where are your rooms?" So we had to walk all the way across with him, wondering, what are we going to say when we get up there? And somebody in there. Finally, with about 10 yards left to go, he left us off. But there was always exciting times. Not long afterwards, Fram, Rob and I decided it was time to go for a foreign holiday. And so we set off for a sun holiday in Ibiza, well ahead of the time before it was very, very popular. And we had a great, great holiday. We stayed in San Antonio, hired scooters and traveled all around the island, and especially to Ibiza town, which is a beautiful, beautiful town with lovely old buildings. And this was where all sort of the hippies at the time, who were very trendy, were staying. And we sampled the local brew, Yervis, and everything like that. And it was marvelous. Great holiday. The hotel where we stayed at had two little lifts, and every morning around 8 o'clock, the lift coming down would be full of German tourists with their towels to book a sunbed by the pool, and the lift going up had 3 very dishevelled Irish tourists from Cork going to bed. About a year later, Fram and I decided to go for a motoring holiday to France and Spain with Joe Ludgate and his girlfriend at the time. We borrowed Joe's brother Brian's car for the holiday. It was a car called a Triumph Dolomite 1300, which will mean nothing to most people here, and it had definitely seen better days. On the way from Cork to Rosslare to get the ferry, the battery cracked in half, but again, it was thanks to Fram's mechanical knowledge and experience that we managed to replace it and make the ferry. However, this is a point that I want to add on to what Rob had said earlier on. Fram was always very easygoing, reasonable, and a very pleasant, friendly manner. However, if Fram thought that somebody was taking advantage of him or was being very unreasonable, he would not be shy in letting that person or persons know why. We would never have got the battery from the AA in Waterford, except that Fram refused to take no for an answer, that they couldn't get a battery in time for us to make the ferry. Likewise, while on that holiday, Fram and I went to a cinema on the Champs-Élysées in Paris at one stage. It turned out to be a very expensive cinema to get into. And when the usher, after showing us the seats, she asked Fram for a tip to tourist, he nearly had a heart attack, and he told her why. I always remember he had similar feelings for Cork City Corporation traffic wardens who would sometimes try to give his customers cars outside the garage parking tickets. He was never very too pleased with that. Anyway, we had another memorable holiday, and the car, despite the fact that the starter motor packed up and had to be push-started every time, we managed to travel the length of France over the Pyrenees, via Andorra, and down to Barcelona and back. Again, Fram could also be very polite when everybody else around them were losing their cool. One Saturday night, Fram and I had been drinking at Bunny Kennellan's, Myrtleville, and decided that we would drive over to Crosshaven and go dancing at, you wouldn't say the Majorca, it had to be the Majorca. It was the real Cork thing, the Majorca Ballroom, which was an old ballroom where the boatyard are now at this stage. And there used to be a big fire in the middle of it, blazing away. And I just thinking of the insurance nowadays, my goodness. So anyway, I had an MGB sports car at the time with a soft top, and of course we had it down. We arrived at midnight, and the dance was due to end at 2 a.m. For some strange reason, neither Fram or I could put up the hood properly. The buttons and fasteners all seemed to be in the wrong places for some strange reason. After about half an hour, a guard car pulled up alongside us, and 2 Gardaí must have thought that we were trying to steal the car. They were giving us a fair going over when Fram, out of the blue, turned to the nearest guard and very politely said, "Excuse me, guard, do you know how to put up the hood of an MGB Roadster?" The guard was so taken aback, he just turned around and said, "Will you go home, sissy, and stop and just go home?" So finally, we got the hood up about a quarter of an hour later, and the dance had finished about an hour earlier. So not long afterwards, the most important thing in Fram's life happened. He met and fell madly in love with Barbara. Rob and I began to hear this name cropping up more and more when we were talking to Fram. And one day I bumped into Barbara at Shorten's house beside Ashton. I think it was the first time we met. And I could immediately see why Fram was so taken with Barbara. But being the mess that I was, I decided I'd take the spark plug cover off her Honda 50 and see what happens next. Unfortunately, much to my disappointment, Barbara went out to her bike, which of course wouldn't start, and she just calmly looked at the engine, put the thing back on, and off she went. A woman not to be messed with, right from day one. It is wonderful to see 2 people meet up, fall in love, and blossom together as they go through life, and this is certainly the case with Barbara and Fram. We all had great fun going to West Cork and Kerry for weekends to places like Dragumna and Doon and Orr. Fram and Barbara loved the scenery, the culture, and the lifestyle of down west. Fram and Barbara were the first of our gang to get married, buy their own house, and have children. And I mean, you were just way ahead of us all, way ahead of us all. I'll always remember Gavin's birthday, as Barbara couldn't attend my wedding to Helen, as she was in hospital having Gavin. So that was a few years ago now. Rob and Fram were my best men. Barbara and Fram had some legendary parties in the house in Carrigaline, and we were always made feel most welcome. I decided on the first evening to bring a bottle of champagne to one of their first parties and in the new home. And when I popped it, the cork went straight through a large round paper light shade in their living room, which was their pride and joy. I didn't do that again. Fram was always, again, theme running through everything today we've spoken. He was a great host and at these social get-togethers. And He would always be the life and soul of the party and the last one standing. On the commercial side of things, Fram and I were very much in tune as we were both self-employed and ran family business, namely a garage and a supermarket. We used to have great chats about all the usual problems, challenges and opportunities that we were both experiencing in the business. Fram, of course, ran the Lee Garage Fiat and Lancia dealership for many years. I love cars and so did Fram. From an early age, the Lee Garage and Fram's office was almost like a second home for me in Cork, and I don't say that lightly. I mean that. It was always an oasis for me to head for straight away. The first car that I bought from Fram was a Lancia Beta Coupe. Now, this again, I'm sorry for non-car lovers, but just a small little bit detail here. Then there was a Fiat X19 Bertone, a Fiat Ritmo soft top, and at least 15 more cars and vans, all of which were Italian. Fram and Rob always had interesting Italian cars: Fiat 124 Sports, Fiat 850 Coupes, beautiful cars, Lancias and Alfa Romeos. And if I'm not mistaken, and from the conversation today, I know I'm not mistaken, Fram has his lovely yellow Alfa Romeo Spider. And I think Gavin might have a lovely red Alfa Romeo Spider up his sleeve somewhere. Am I correct? Beautiful cars. Definitely, there was petrol coursing through our veins and my son Peter's veins. Fram was very kind and helpful to Peter with his cars when he was going through his, what I would refer to politely as his modified cars phase. It's more politically correct. He helped Peter sell a Rally Focus and import a Peugeot rally car from Northern Ireland. Fram used to get in some very exotic Italian supercars in his showroom from time to time: Ferraris, Maseratis, Porsches, etc. And I think, and he confirmed it to me earlier outside, so he's in trouble now with his wife, his brother Donald actually had a Maserati at one stage, and a beautiful car. And Fram then also let me drive a very rare and red Lancia Delta Integrale, which he had over a weekend. And to me, that was a huge treat, as I rate that car as one of the best cars ever built. And this now is where Rory might start getting a little bit interested in things. Where's Rory? This is for you. For my 40th birthday party, there's no pressure now at all here, Gavin. Helen and Fram organised the best birthday present ever: a trip to the Ferrari factory at Maranello in Italy. It was Helen's idea, and it was Fram who made it possible. Through his contacts in Fiat Ireland, Fram applied for 2 passes to view the historic factory with a group of international motoring correspondents. So Fram told them that we were 2 Irish motoring correspondents from that very well-known Irish newspaper, the Immokalee People. And the extraordinary thing is that they bought it. That was great. So off we went, and we had one of the most memorable trips of our lives. We were shown all over the factory in Maranello. I was given a gift of a piece of leather with the Ferrari logo of a prancing horse embossed in it by an elderly lady who was stitching some leather seats for some of the new cars of the Ferraris. We saw busloads of Italian school kids cheering on the Formula One Ferraris, testing on their nearby racetrack. We ate in the Cavallino Ferrari restaurant beside the factory, surrounded by displays of all the racing helmets of famous Ferrari drivers over the years and all the trophies won at Formula One races by Ferrari. It was mind-blowing. And the pièce de résistance was when we saw Nick Mason, drummer from Pink Floyd, and that's, I think, the second time Pink Floyd has cropped up in today. He drove by in his world-famous 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, an absolute classic. In fact, one of these cars was bought at auction in January of this year for $70 million. So I'll put off getting my own for another year or two, I think. As well as visiting the Ferrari factory, Fram and I were based in Milan, and I could see that Fram was in his element with all things Italian. He loved the people, the culture, traditions. He loved their style. He loved all the beautiful old buildings. He soaked up the atmosphere. Both Fram and I were particularly taken by the magnificent cathedral in central Milan, Il Duomo di Milano. We travelled by train to Venice and to Modena and saw a lot of Italy. And I know Fram was very much at home here. He really, really, really loved the travelling in Italy. When Barbara and Fram visited countries abroad on their holidays, unlike Helen and myself, we tend to head for a bit of luxury, a nice, easy holiday, very boring, very predictable, get a bit of sun, and off we went. Fram and Barbara went the exact opposite direction. They always wanted to see the real country and not just the tourist areas, and they liked to meet the locals and see how they lived. For example, I remember when they went on a fabulous holiday to Havana in Cuba to learn as much as they could about the people and the country. They were great adventurers and would always have fascinating tales to tell on their return. And I'm nearing the end, so I'll put you out of your agony now shortly, but the lure of West Cork is just what I would like to refer to briefly. Fram always loved going down to West Cork for weekends from an early age. He loved the environment, the scenery, the coastline, the slower pace of life and the people. Barbara's mum and dad, as you heard earlier, decided to retire in Schull and bought a house there in 1981. Fram and Rob celebrated their 40th, 50th and 60th birthdays in Castle Townsend by renting a beautiful old house, which was only a stone's throw away from Mary Ann's pub. And in fact, Helen and I and Barbara and Fram had met before we got married many, many years ago inside in that very pub. We were playing darts. Remember that occasion well. Everybody would stay in the old house, which is rumoured to be haunted. And on the first occasion, I was convinced it was. And the celebrations would last for the entire weekend. Again, Fram was centre stage, making sure everybody was having a great time, ably assisted by Rob. In 1996, Fram and Barbara bought a lovely old farmhouse and some land overlooking the sea and Schull Harbour, and with Mount Gabriel in the background. They did a magnificent job in modernising and extending the house, while at the same time ensuring that the house retained its character and was sympathetic to the surrounding landscape. Fram and Barbara spent more and more time staying in the new home in Schull and less time at the family home in Carrigaline. Fram really enjoyed getting back to nature and working on the land around their new home in Schull. Fram got an old tractor. He bought a boat, which he used for fishing and for bringing members of his family for trips out to the local islands. And he had a fine-sized shed where he was able to store things of interest and maintain his man toys. Very important. Helen and I had the pleasure of staying at their beautiful new home, and we had some memorable evenings with Fram, again, which Rob would have referred to earlier on, and Barbara. And we enjoyed the best of company, food, fine wines, banter, and of course, the maestro himself, Fram, making sure that we all had a good time. In recent years, Fram began to take more time off from work, and Gavin was back in the business with him. Shortly afterwards, Barbara and Fram decided to live in Schull full-time, and they sold their home in Carrigaline. But not before we had one fine meal together in Hillcrest to celebrate all the happy memories that we'd enjoyed over the years. Throughout all the years that we were friends, Fram would always keep in touch. And sometimes we mightn't see each other for months. And then from out of the blue, I'd get a phone call and it would be Fram inquiring how he was getting on and was everybody okay. The other thing which I feel is a sign of a real friend is that while we might not have been in touch for ages, after talking for a minute or two, it felt like we'd been talking only a few moments earlier and not a few months ago. The last time that I saw Fram was on a beautiful summer's day. I'm going to have to skip the last bit, but just suffice to say that at the very, very end, I was looking at the dictionary today, and I said, how will I finish this up? I just said, a person's legacy is about the richness of the individual's life, including what that person accomplished and the impact he or she had on people and places. I know that you will all agree with me when I say that Frampton has left a great legacy behind him, and one that will be carried on into the future by Barbara and their children and grandchildren, and by his family, Rob, Donald and Audrey. Rest in peace, Fram.
Thank you, Ken. We're going to sing a hymn now to end us. Well, actually, I'm going to pray after the hymn, so we won't quite end, but let's stand and sing this together. Ben, are you playing or are we doing this a cappella? Let's stand. Join in when you hear the music. Words are on the back. Things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. Each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings, He made the glowing clovers, and summer sun, the ripe fruits in the garden, he made them every one. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. He gave us eyes to see them, and lips that we might tell how great is God Almighty, who has made all things well. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. Please sit down, folks. I'm just going to finish with a prayer. I have one of my own, and then we'll end with the Lord's Prayer together. Let's pray. Father God in heaven, we've heard a lot today about the impact that Fram had. We thank you for this man. We thank you for the ways in which you made him. He was a husband to one, a father and a brother to a few, and a friend to many. He did well, Father, and his loves were seeds that have borne fruit in their lives, and they enjoyed it, Father. And we enjoyed you through him. So I thank you for Frampton. Thank you for the man that he was, and the ways in which he made us who we are. We pray again for his family and his friends here today. We ask that you give him a good few days in the next few days of remembering him and honoring him well. And we end with the prayer the Lord Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Friends, we've come to the end of the service. Thanks for showing up. As you go into the rest of your week, remember the man that you heard about today. Remember the man that he made you, and live it out. God bless you all, and you're all invited to Ballymaloe Grain Store for tea and chat, and no doubt much car chat as well in the next while. Shine.